My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 41 years old. I'm a senior financial analyst, a wife, a mother of one, and apparently the only person in my family who understood that money doesn't appear by believing hard enough. 3 months ago, my mother looked at my 4-year-old daughter, my daughter, who had driven 6 hours in the back seat without a single complaint, clutching her stuffed elephant and singing songs she made up herself, and handed her a sleeping bag. Not a bed, not the pull-out sofa, a sleeping bag. Blue nylon, the kind that crinkles when you breathe, and pointed to the floor. My sister Renee's family got the guest room. King bed, heated blankets, the little turtle nightlight my daughter Cora asks about every time we visit. They got all of it. My daughter got 37 square feet of cold hardwood next to the radiator that clicks all night. When I looked at my mother's face, really looked, I didn't see cruelty. I saw something much worse. I saw a woman who genuinely could not understand why I was making this into a thing. That night, I packed Cora into the car at 11:15, buckled her in while she was half asleep, kissed her forehead, closed the door quietly, drove 6 hours home in the dark. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't send a single text. I just stopped. Stopped paying, stopped funding, stopped being the engine running silently underneath everything. And 3 days later, my mother's world started coming apart at the seams. Not because I said a word, because I finally didn't. Before I take you all the way back to that night, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're listening from, because the story I'm about to tell you is one I've been carrying for 11 years, and it deserves witnesses. Let me take you back. Not to that night, not yet. Further back. To a Tuesday afternoon in March, 13 years ago. I'm 28 years old. I'm sitting in a hospital room at St. Augustine Medical Center in Harlow, Ohio, and my father is dying. His name was Gerald Callahan, Jerry to everyone who loved him. He was 59 years old and looked 75. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They'd caught it 8 months earlier and spent those 8 months trying to outrun a fire that had already burned through the walls. He was a carpenter. His hands, even at the end, looked like tools. Wide palms, thick knuckles. The kind of hands that knew how to build things from nothing. I sat beside his bed on a Tuesday because Renee couldn't make it. She had something, I don't remember what. I'd stopped keeping track of Renee's reasons by then. Dad held my hand and stared at the ceiling for a long time before he spoke. Nora. His voice came out rough and slow, like gravel dragged through mud. I need to tell you something. I said, Dad, rest. I've been resting for 3 months. He almost smiled. Listen. So I listened. He told me he'd set something up, a private savings account, separate from everything else. He'd been putting money in it for 4 years, quietly, without telling anyone. Small amounts at first, then larger ones when he started feeling sick and doing the math on how much time he had left. The account had $62,000 in it. It's not for your mother, he said. She'll get the house, the pension, the life insurance. She'll be fine. Then who? Renee. I went quiet. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were still sharp. They were always the last thing to go, those eyes. You know how she is, Nora. He said it without judgment, like he was describing the weather. She means well. She loves hard. But she can't hold things together. Kevin tries, but Kevin is... He paused. Kevin is doing his best with what he's got. Kevin Marsh, Renee's husband, electrician, sweet man, earned a decent wage and watched it disappear every month and never quite understood why. I'm leaving you the account, Dad said. Not to give to her outright. If I give it to Renee, it'll be gone in a year. Kitchen renovation, a vacation, something. Gone. He coughed. I waited. I want you to manage it. Feed it into her life quietly. When she needs something real, a bill she can't cover, a medical thing, something for the kids, you cover it. But she doesn't know it's you. She thinks it's just... He searched for the word. Luck. Timing. God providing. Whatever she needs to believe. I stared at him. Dad, that's... I know. For how long? He looked at the ceiling again. Until the money runs out. Or until she finds her feet. He passed 6 weeks later, May 11th. I gave the eulogy. I stood at that podium and spoke about his hands and his laugh and the way he always smelled like pine shavings and strong coffee, and the whole time there was a weight in my chest that had nothing to do with grief. It was the weight of a promise. A private, invisible, impossible promise. And I kept it. For 11 years, I kept it. Let me tell you what that looked like in practice. The account Dad left had $62,000. I added to it. Every year, I deposited a portion of my own salary, quietly, separately, the way he taught me to manage things. By the time everything unraveled, the account had passed through $104,000. $104,000, sent in careful, invisible increments into Renee's life. I have the records. I'm a financial analyst. I keep records the way other people keep diaries. Here's what the spreadsheet says. Kevin's truck repair after the transmission failed. 11 months after Dad died. $2,400. I paid the mechanic directly. Told him to tell Kevin it was a warranty issue. Renee's second pregnancy. The out-of-pocket costs after insurance. Lab work, specialist visits, the NICU stay for baby Lila, who came 6 weeks early and spent 9 days under warming lights. $18,200. Funneled through what looked like a hospital billing error correction. I made sure it looked administrative. The roof. 3 years after Dad died. Ice damming cracked it in 2 places. $11,000. I used a contractor 2 towns over, paid cash from the account, told Renee the previous owner's insurance had finally processed a claim. The car. Renee's Subaru with 190,000 miles and an engine that sounded like a blender full of gravel. $7,500. I put it in an envelope and told her it was a grant from a community housing fund I'd found through work. She Googled it and found nothing. She decided God was looking out for her. The kitchen. I need to pause on the kitchen, because the kitchen is where it turns. 3 years ago, Kevin fell off a ladder at a job site. 30 feet. He hit a scaffolding rail on the way down and shattered 2 vertebrae in his lower back. Renee called me at 10:07 on a Wednesday night, crying so hard I could barely hear the words. I wired $14,000 within 48 hours. No questions, no paperwork, no repayment plan. I labeled it in the account. Kevin Medical / emergency housing / groceries. And then I sat back down at my desk and finished a quarterly report. 8 months later, I was scrolling through Instagram, something I almost never do, and a photo stopped me mid-scroll. Renee's kitchen. New quartz countertops, matte white, the kind that costs $300 a square foot. Subway tile backsplash in a herringbone pattern. A farmhouse sink. Open shelving with little ceramic labels. The caption: "Grateful for this beautiful life. God provides." 31 comments. Heart emojis. Mom had commented, "My baby deserves every beautiful thing." Kevin had gone back to work in 6 weeks. Not the 3 months Renee had told me. 6 weeks. The $14,000 was not for medical bills. It was for a kitchen. I sat at my desk and stared at that photo for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I know the exact time because my computer screen logs inactivity, and it logged it. I didn't call Renee. I didn't call Mom. I opened the spreadsheet, added a new line, typed the amount, and categorized it. Kitchen remodel, presented as medical emergency. Then I closed the laptop, and I went to tuck in Cora, who was 3 years old and had gone to sleep in a real bed, in her real room, under a quilt my mother-in-law made by hand. My daughter, in a bed, the way children are supposed to sleep. I held on to that for a long time. You need to understand my mother to understand why this story ends the way it does. Eleanor Callahan is 66 years old. She was born and raised in Harlow, Ohio, population 12,000, 1 Main Street, 3 churches, a hardware store my grandfather owned that burned down in 1987 and was never rebuilt. She is the kind of woman who never enters a room quietly. She has opinions about everything: your hair, your choices, the brand of peanut butter you buy, the route you took to get here. And she has one rule that runs underneath all the others like a current nobody talks about. Renee comes first. Not because she loves Renee more. I used to believe that. I spent years believing that. But the truth, the one my father's sister, Aunt Patricia, spelled out for me over the phone 18 months ago, is simpler and sadder than that. Renee threatens to leave. She always has. Since she was 17 years old and screaming, "I hate you and I'm moving out and don't expect me at Christmas." She holds the door open and Mom folds every single time. I never threatened anything. I just showed up. I drove 4 hours. I brought groceries. I helped with taxes. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to problems I was then expected to solve. And because I never once picked up my coat and moved toward the exit, my mother learned, not consciously, not cruelly, just learned the way you learn what a switch does when you flip it, that I would stay, no matter what, that I was permanent, that I didn't require maintenance. Permanent things don't need to be thanked. Permanent things don't need beds. Now let me take you to the night that ended it. Last October. A long weekend. Mom's idea. She called it a family gathering, which in Callahan language means Nora drives, Nora cooks, everyone else shows up. Cora and I left Columbus at 4:30 in the morning. My husband James couldn't make it, a work conference in Phoenix that had been scheduled for months. I'd thought about canceling. Part of me wished I had. But Cora had been asking about Grandma Eleanor for weeks. She'd colored a picture of a house with 5 stick figures and taped it to her bedroom door and said, "That's for Grandma. Can we give it to her?" How do you say no to that? We pulled into Mom's driveway at 10:45 a.m. I popped the trunk. 2 bags of groceries, ingredients for chicken marsala, a peach cobbler I'd baked at 6 a.m. that morning, fresh bread, the good butter. Cora ran to the door calling, "Grandma!" before I'd even shouldered my bag. Mom opened the door and swept Cora into a hug that lasted a full breath. Then she looked at me over Cora's shoulder and said, "You made good time." No hug, no hello, not even a look at the grocery bags. "Traffic wasn't bad," I said, and followed her inside. The house smelled the same it always does. Lemon dish soap and old radiator heat, and something slightly floral from the plug-in by the stairs. I set the groceries on the counter and looked around. Renee's coat was already on the hook by the door. Renee's kids' shoes, 3 pairs, were lined up on the mat. I hadn't seen Renee's car in the driveway. "When did Renee get here?" "Yesterday," Mom said, already moving toward the living room. "She needed some extra time." I didn't ask what that meant. I carried our suitcase upstairs, turned left toward the guest room, and stopped. The door was open. Inside, Renee's green overnight bag on the chair, her kids' backpacks lined up against the dresser, the quilt on the bed, the old handmade one that used to belong to my grandmother, was freshly smoothed. Renee's reading glasses on the nightstand. They'd claimed it. Not Renee herself, her things, like a flag planted before the ship even lands. I looked at the guest bed, queen mattress, the little turtle nightlight Cora loves, the one that throws green and blue shapes on the ceiling, was plugged into the wall right where Cora always asks to sleep. I walked back downstairs. "Mom, are Renee and Kevin in the guest room?" She was at the stove stirring something, didn't turn around. "We'll work it out when everyone's together tonight." She used my full name a second later when I started to respond. She only does that when the decision is already made. Renee arrived at 6:15 with Kevin and the 3 kids. Mom met them at the door like it was a parade. She hugged Renee for a long time, one of those full-body hugs where both people rock a little. She kissed each grandchild. She waved at Kevin. She said, "Oh, you look wonderful, sweetheart," and took Renee's hand and led her into the house like she was escorting someone important to their reserved seat. I was in the kitchen finishing the chicken marsala. Cora was sitting on the kitchen floor drawing. Renee walked past the kitchen doorway, glanced in, looked at me the way you look at the furniture when you're checking if anything's changed. "Hey," she said. Didn't stop walking. Her youngest, Lila, 6 years old, the one who spent 9 days in the NICU on my money, bumped the door frame and didn't look up from her tablet. An hour later, I found Mom in the hallway outside the linen closet. "Mom, I need to know where Cora and I are sleeping." She reached to the back shelf without turning around. She pulled out a sleeping bag. One sleeping bag. Blue nylon, the crinkling kind. The kind designed for exactly 1 adult. She held it out to me the way you hand someone a gas receipt. "The guest room's for Renee. You 2 can take the living room floor. There's a throw blanket on the couch arm." I looked at the sleeping bag. Then I looked at my mother. Cora is 4. Kids love sleeping bags, Nora. It's like camping. From the top of the stairs, Renee's voice. Easy, casual. The tone of someone who had pre-won. You could have booked a hotel, Nor. She was leaning on the railing, arms crossed, half smiling. Kevin stood behind her. He looked at the floor. I looked at the sleeping bag in my hands. Muscle memory took over. I said, okay. 12 years of taking what was handed to me and finding somewhere to store the thing it made me feel. I took the sleeping bag. I walked downstairs. Dinner was at 7:30. I had been cooking since noon. Chicken marsala, roasted potatoes with rosemary and sea salt, a green salad with the dressing I make from scratch, Dijon, red wine vinegar, a little honey, fresh bread, peach cobbler for dessert, still warm, with the crumble top Cora had helped press down with her little palms at 6 a.m. that morning. Renee brought a 2-liter bottle of store-brand ginger ale and a bag of dinner rolls from the gas station on Route 12. Mom set the table. Renee to her right, the chair with the padded seat and the armrests, Kevin across from her, the 3 kids in a row, Mom at the head. Cora did not have a chair. Mom had set up a step stool, the kind you use to reach the top shelf of the pantry, and put a folded towel on top of it. I stood in the doorway with the serving dish in my hands and looked at my 4-year-old daughter's dinner seat, a step stool with a folded towel. James wasn't here. I felt his absence like a missing wall. I set the dish on the table and helped Cora climb up. She was cheerful about it. She's 4. She's cheerful about most things. Mom clasped her hands before we ate. She said she was grateful, that God had brought this family together, that she was especially thankful for Renee's strength, her resilience, for the beautiful grandchildren Renee had given her. She named all 3 of Renee's kids, Lila, Marcus, Danny, by name, slowly, with her eyes closed. She did not mention Cora. She did not mention who had cooked the meal. She said amen. The table said amen. Forks lifted. Halfway through dinner, Marcus, Renee's oldest, 13 years old, looked up from his plate. Aunt Nora, you made all of this? Silence. The kind that lands on a table like something dropped. She did, Kevin said quietly before I could answer. Mom reached for the bread basket. Who wants more potatoes? Renee leaned toward Kevin, just low enough that it was meant to be heard. I mean, chicken marsala isn't exactly complicated. It's just a pan sauce. Cora pulled on my sleeve. She whispered it against my arm, quiet as a question asked in church. Mommy, why didn't Grandma say my name? I put my hand on her knee under the table. I said, eat your chicken, baby. It was the only answer I had. And I knew, in that moment, sitting with my hand on my 4-year-old's knee on a step stool, that it was the last time I was going to say it. 9:45 p.m. I was at the kitchen sink, elbows in dish soap, working on the marsala pan, the kind of fond and butter residue that bonds itself to the stainless like it intends to stay forever. James called. I propped the phone against the dish rack and answered with a wet hand. How is it? He said. I looked through the doorway into the living room. Cora was on her hands and knees on the hardwood floor. She was trying to unroll the sleeping bag. The nylon kept sliding. She'd smooth one end flat and the other would curl. She'd press it down again. It would curl again. She was working at it with the focused determination she applies to everything, puzzles, drawings, learning to tie her shoes, as if it were simply a problem to be solved and not evidence of something much worse. James, Yeah? I need you to listen to me. And I told him, not with anger, not with tears. I just described what I was looking at. The step stool, the sleeping bag, the dinner, the names Mom had said and the names she hadn't. When I stopped talking, James was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said, Nora, come home. Not, it's just one night. Not, let it go. Come home. The kids sleep in beds in our house, he said. I don't care what time it is. Come home. I turned off the faucet. Okay. I'll have the heat on. Okay. Nora. Yeah? 12 years is long enough. I moved quietly. Upstairs in under 4 minutes. Suitcase zipped, toiletries swept in, Cora's backpack, her elephant Percy, the emergency snack bag I keep in the outer pocket. Downstairs, Cora in her coat, hood up, half asleep on her feet. I carried her. We were at the front door. Mom's voice from the hallway. What are you doing? It's almost midnight. We're going home. You're leaving. Over a sleeping bag. Renee appeared at the top of the stairs. Pajamas, arms crossed, the look on her face that I had spent my entire childhood trying to avoid provoking. Oh, here we go, she said. The grand exit. Nora always needs a scene. I zipped Cora's coat the rest of the way. Mom stepped closer. You're being ridiculous. One night on the floor isn't going to hurt anyone. I looked at my mother, calm, clear. Something settled in me the way sediment settles when the water finally goes still. Mom, the last time you asked how I was doing, not what I could give you, not what I could fix, but how I was at Dad's funeral, 11 years ago. The hallway went silent. Renee's arms came uncrossed. Mom opened her mouth. That's not... Name the last time. I'll wait. Nothing. That's what I thought. I picked up Cora and walked out the front door. The night air hit my face like cold water. Clean. The car was at the curb. I buckled Cora into her seat. She blinked up at me. Mommy, are we going somewhere? We're going home, baby. Our home? Our home. She closed her eyes before I'd finished buckling her in. I closed her door, walked around to the driver's side. I did not look back at the house. I didn't need to. I already knew no one would be on the porch. I got in, started the car, pulled away from the curb, and somewhere around the corner of Greenfield and Route 9, something in my chest shifted. Not cracked, shifted. The way a foundation settles before it finally decides to hold. 6 hours on a dark highway. Cora didn't wake up once. James was in the driveway when I pulled in at 4:48 a.m., standing there in his coat with 2 mugs of coffee. He took Cora from the back seat, carried her inside, put her in her bed, pulled the blanket up. When he came back to the kitchen, he set a mug in front of me, sat down across the table, and didn't say anything. That's James. He knows when words are furniture and when they're walls. My phone buzzed at 5:10. Mom. I let it ring. 5:22. Mom again. 5:47. Renee. Text. Way to make everything about you. Hope you're happy. I turned the phone face down, and I opened my laptop. I keep a spreadsheet. I've kept it for 11 years, not to use as a weapon, not to hold over anyone. I kept it because Dad asked me to keep records, because that's how the account was managed, because I'm a financial analyst and numbers are the language I use when everything else becomes noise. I pulled up the summary tab. The screen glowed in the dark kitchen. James came and stood behind me, set his hand on my shoulder without looking at the numbers. He'd seen them before. He'd accepted them the way you accept the tide, not because you think it's right that the tide exists, but because arguing with water is a different kind of drowning. I scrolled. Kevin's truck, $2,400. Lila's NICU bills, $18,200. The roof, $11,000. The car, $7,500. Medical and emergency transfers, various, $31,600. The kitchen, presented as medical emergency, $14,000. Kids' activities, school fees, supplies, camp registrations, $9,300. Miscellaneous urgent transfers, 2014 through last year, $10,000. Total disbursed from the account over 11 years, $104,000. James read the number. He didn't say I told you so. He never has. He said, "What are you going to do?" I stared at the number on the screen. I looked at the hallway, at Cora's room at the end of it, at the little stripe of nightlight under her door. I'm going to stop. The account? Everything. He was quiet for a moment. The account closes, she finds out what was funding her life. I know. She won't handle it well. I know. He refilled my coffee. Then I guess she'll have to learn. The morning after I got home, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote the list by hand. I always write important things by hand first. 1. Close the private account. Effective immediately, cease all disbursements. 2. Cancel the automatic transfer for Renee and Kevin's supplemental grocery fund, $400 per month, set up 3 years ago, labeled on their bank statement as a community aid program. They'd never questioned it. 3. Cancel the summer camp registrations I'd paid for, Lila and Danny. 2 spots, one with a wait list, $3,200 total. 4. Cancel the school supply fund I managed annually through an account I'd set up in the name of a fictional community foundation. $800 a year, 8 years running. 5. Withdraw my name as emergency contact and financial guarantor on Kevin's contractor insurance policy, which I'd been co-signing since the accident 3 years ago and which dropped his premium by 40%. 6. Stop filing Mom's state and federal taxes, which I had been doing every February for 11 years because she never learned how after Dad died and never asked me to teach her, only asked me to do it. 6 items, clean, ordered, the kind of list I make for quarterly audits. I stared at them for a long time. Then I got up, poured the rest of my coffee down the drain, and started making calls. The first call was the bank. 23 minutes. The account Dad had started, the one I'd managed and grown for 11 years, was closed by 11:15 a.m. I sat there after I hung up and felt absolutely nothing for about 45 seconds. Then something moved through me that I can only describe as a door closing. Not slamming, closing. The soft, certain sound of a thing that is finished. The second call was the camp. Summer programs. Lila and Danny Marsh registered under a family scholarship I'd created and administered and funded myself. The woman at the front desk was kind. She asked if there was anything she could do. I said, "Please send the cancellation to Renee Marsh directly. She'll need to know the spots are available for other families." A pause. Of course. Is there a reason I can tell her for the cancellation? Just administrative changes. Thank you. I hung up. I won't walk you through every call. I'll just tell you it took 4 hours, and that by the time I was done, my voice was completely steady. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, because I was feeling everything. And for the first time in 11 years, I was letting it matter in the right direction. James found me at the table at 2 p.m., legal pad in front of me, all 6 items checked. He sat down. He looked at the list. Done? Done. He looked at me the way he does when he's reading something behind my eyes. How do you feel? I thought about it. Quiet, I said. Like the moment after a long alarm finally stops. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Outside, Cora was in the backyard making something with sticks and mud that she had decided was a house for the birds. We watched her through the kitchen window for a little while. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. 3 days later, Renee called. I didn't answer. She called 4 more times between 9 a.m. and noon. Then she texted. The camp called and said Lila and Danny's spots are canceled. What did you do? I set the phone down and went back to my work. Nora, answer me. I know this was you. Mom is upset. You're tearing this family apart over a sleeping bag. You're being petty and cruel, and I don't even recognize you right now. I read each one. I felt nothing land. That was new. For 11 years, Renee's texts had landed like stones. I'd carried each one. This time, they hit the screen and stayed there. I put the phone in the kitchen drawer. Went to get Cora from the backyard. We made hot chocolate and watched a movie, and I braided her hair 3 times because she kept asking me to do it again. It was the best afternoon I'd had in months. A week later, Mom called. I answered this one. I needed to hear what she'd say. Not to decide anything, I'd already decided. Just to know. Nora. Her voice was tight, controlled. The voice she uses when she's managing herself. Hi, Mom. The camp called Renee, and Renee tells me there are some other changes happening that I don't understand. What changes? The program she was receiving for groceries. It stopped. I said nothing. And something with Kevin's insurance. He got a letter. I said nothing. Nora, what is going on? I stopped some things I was doing. What things? What things were you doing? And here's the thing about that question. She asked it without knowing what the answer was. She asked it as if she expected the answer to be small, as if the things I'd been doing were small. Mom, I'll tell you everything, but not on the phone. A pause. When? When you drive here. Another pause. Longer. All right, she said. And I could hear something shift in her voice, something uncertain. The sound of a woman who has started to understand that the ground she's standing on might not belong to her. All right, she said again. I'll come on Saturday. Before Saturday, Renee came. I didn't invite her. She showed up Thursday at noon. 3-hour drive, red-rimmed eyes, the careful kind, like she'd spent the last 20 minutes preparing them in the car. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table and put her hands flat on the surface. You need to undo whatever you did. The kids are asking questions. Kevin got a letter about the insurance and he has no idea what it means. And the grocery thing, whatever that was, Kevin noticed and he's been weird about it. What did you tell him? I told him it was a glitch. I looked at my sister. I'd looked at her my whole life and found something shifting in the way I looked. Some calculation my brain was always running. What does she need? How do I fix this? How do I say this so she doesn't leave? That calculation had stopped. I just saw her. 43 years old. Dark hair like mine. Dad's eyes. A tightness around her mouth that has lived there for as long as I can remember. Renee, I need to tell you something. If it's about the sleeping bag, it's not about the sleeping bag. She stopped. It's about Dad. I watched her face as I told her. I told her slowly, carefully, the way you tell someone something that will change the shape of their past. Dad's account, the $62,000, the plan, the promise I'd made with his hand in mine in that hospital room, her truck, her Nike bills, her roof, her car, the grocery fund, the school supplies, the camp, the kitchen. I put that one last. I said it plainly. No inflection, no accusation. The $14,000 you told me was for Kevin's medical bills. I paid it into the account. The same account that funded the kitchen remodel. The room was very still. Renee's hands were flat on the table. She wasn't moving. I didn't know where it was coming from, she said. Her voice came out strange, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I know. Dad never... He didn't want you to know. He thought you'd refuse it if you knew it was from him, or from me. She looked up. Her eyes were doing something I hadn't seen them do in a long time. Not the careful performance of the car ride crying. Something real, something involuntary. All of it? She said. All of it. The car. Yes. The roof. Yes. Lila's. Her voice broke on her youngest daughter's name. The NICU. Yes. She put both hands over her mouth. I gave her time. Outside, a car passed on the street. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. For 11 years, she said, muffled behind her hands. Yes. She took a breath. Then she said it. Quiet, like she was saying it to herself. I thought we just got lucky. I know. I thought we figured it out. I know. She dropped her hands. She looked at me across the table with something in her eyes I had never seen directed at me in 41 years. Shame. Not performance, not management. Real, raw, undefended shame. She didn't say anything else for a long time. Then, the kitchen. Yes. I used the money you sent for Kevin's injury to remodel my kitchen. You told me it was medical bills. I know what I told you. A pause. Renee. I know. Her voice cracked cleanly. I know, Nora. I wasn't angry. I want to be precise about that. I had been angry, for years, in quiet, private ways I never named. Sitting at this table, watching my sister realize that the life she believed she'd built was built with invisible hands, her dead father's wishes and her living sister's labor and silence. I wasn't angry. I was grieving. For the version of the story where she'd known, where I'd been allowed to say, It's me. I'm here. Where we'd been something to each other besides this. What do I do? She said. That's not something I can answer for you. Are you going to tell Kevin? That's also not something I can answer for you. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, You slept on the floor. Cora slept on the floor. Something moved across her face, a tremor, like a wall recognizing it's been hit before it falls. She nodded. She stood up slowly. She picked up her keys from the table. At the door, she stopped. She didn't turn around. The things you said to Mom before you left, were you always holding all of that? Yes. For how long? About 25 years. She stood there with her back to me for a long moment. Then she walked out. She didn't slam the door. That surprised me more than anything. Saturday. Mom's car in the driveway at 1 p.m. She was wearing the old cardigan, the blue one with the fraying cuffs, the one she wears when she isn't trying to present anything. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table. She started where she always starts, with how other people are perceiving the situation. Renee called me. She told me some of it. I don't know what to believe. Believe it. Nora, all of it is true. I have the records. 11 years of records. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Your father asked you to do this. He asked me to take care of you and Renee. He meant it with love. I honored it with love for 11 years. Then why? Because my daughter slept on the floor. Mom looked up. Because you have been feeding Renee's children and calling it your grandchildren thriving, and you have never once, not once, Mom, looked at Cora and said, that is a remarkable little girl. You have never asked her about her drawings. You have never come to her birthday. You have never once asked me how I am. That's not November. You put her on a step stool for dinner. A step stool, Mom, with a folded towel, because there wasn't enough room at the table for my daughter, your granddaughter. And then you handed her a sleeping bag and pointed at the floor, and Renee stood at the top of the stairs and laughed. Mom set down her mug. I don't have a favorite. You have always had a favorite. Renee needs more. Renee needed everything. For 11 years, she needed everything, and I gave it, and you gave her the credit. You praised her resilience and her strength and her beautiful family, and every single thing you praised was something I quietly paid for. The kitchen was very still. The grocery program she was receiving. Mine. The kids' camp. Mine. Kevin's insurance. Mine. The NICU when Lila was born. Mine. The roof. Mine. The car. Mine. Dad left me an account, and I stretched it and added my own money to it for 11 years because he asked me to take care of this family, and the way this family thanked me was a sleeping bag and a step stool. Mom stared at the table. I reached behind me to the counter. I set something down between us, a manila folder. Inside, the spreadsheet. Printed. 11 years of transactions. Every disbursement labeled, dated, categorized. She looked at it. She did not open it. How much? She said. $104,000. The number sat on the table like a stone. She looked at it. And I watched my mother, a woman I had been watching my entire life for some sign that she saw me, finally, visibly understand the shape of what had been invisible. Her chin trembled. "I didn't know," she said. "I know. If I had known, would it have changed the step stool?" She had no answer for that. "Would it have changed the birthday you missed? The dinner at Thanksgiving where you said every grandchild's name except Cora's? The fact that in 41 years you have never once asked me what I needed?" She was crying now. Real crying. The kind that sounds like effort. I didn't move. I had moved toward her pain for 41 years. This pain was hers. It was time for her to hold it. "What do I do?" she said. Same question as Renee. I had a different answer for my mother. "You start with Cora," I said. She looked up. "You look at my daughter the way you look at Lila. You learn her drawings. You call on a Tuesday just to ask how she is. You come to her next birthday. You start there." Mom wiped her eyes. "And the money?" "The money is gone. I'm not asking for it back. That's not why I told you." "Then why?" I looked at her across the table. My mother, 66 years old, blue cardigan with fraying cuffs, eyes red and startled, the way eyes look when they finally see something they've been looking past for too long. "Because I needed you to know what you had." I want to pause here, because some of you are thinking, "Good, she deserved to know." And some of you are thinking, "But she's your mother. Isn't this too much?" In that second group, I want to ask you something. When you love someone completely, when you show up for them completely, when you give them your father's dying wish and your own income and 11 years of silence, and in return, they hand your 4-year-old daughter a sleeping bag and point at the floor, what would you have done differently? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. In the 2 weeks after that conversation, something happened that I didn't orchestrate. I didn't plan it. I didn't cause it. I didn't even fully expect it. Harlow is a small town, 12,000 people, one main street, a church where everybody knows your business by Tuesday. When Renee called Kevin and told him the truth, all of it, she told me later, she told him everything in one sitting for 2 hours at their kitchen table. Kevin sat quietly through the whole thing. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. When she finished, he said, "I always wondered." Renee said, "You never said anything." What was I supposed to say? "Honey, I think your sister has been secretly funding our life?" You could have said something. Kevin looked at her for a long moment. I could have. So could you. That was the beginning of a different conversation, a harder one they're still having, months later, somewhere in that honest, uncomfortable middle ground where people start telling the truth to each other. Kevin called me. It was a Wednesday evening, quiet. Cora was already asleep. "Nora, I just want to say I'm sorry for my part in it, for taking and not looking too hard at where things came from." I said, "Kevin, you're a good man. You always have been." I should have pushed back more. So should a lot of people. Pause. Marcus, my oldest, he asked me last night if he could write you a letter. He said he wanted to say thank you for the camps and the school stuff. He said nobody ever told him where it came from, and now that he knows, he wants you to know he's grateful. I was quiet for a moment. Tell him he doesn't need to write a letter, I said. Tell him to just pay attention to the people around him who are carrying things. That's all I'd want. Kevin said, "Yeah, I'll tell him that." Mom drove back to Harlow after our kitchen table conversation and sat with what she knew for 3 weeks. I didn't call her. For the first time in my adult life, I let the silence be hers to fill. She filled it the way I'd hoped and didn't dare expect. She called Cora. A Tuesday evening. I was doing dishes. Cora was at the coffee table with her crayons. The phone rang. Mom's name. I answered it and handed it to Cora without saying anything. Cora pressed it to her ear. "Hello?" And I heard my mother's voice, muffled, coming through the speaker. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Grandma Eleanor. What are you drawing?" Cora stood up straight, the way she does when something surprises her with how good it is. "A horse," she said. "It's a brown horse, but I don't have brown, so I used orange. Does that matter?" My mother laughed. I stood at the kitchen sink with soap on my hands and let myself cry for exactly 30 seconds. 6 weeks later, a white envelope in the mailbox, Harlow postmark, Mom's handwriting. I sat on the porch and opened it. 4 pages, blue ink, smudged in places where the pen had pressed hard. Crossed out lines everywhere, false starts, 3 attempts at the first paragraph before she found the right sentence. She wrote, "I've spent 66 years making the people who threatened to leave feel safe. I never thought about what that did to the people who stayed." She wrote about Dad, about the account she hadn't known about the fact that she'd watched Renee's life look lucky and effortless for a decade and had told herself that was God and good character and Renee's resilience. I told myself that story because it was easier than asking questions. If I asked questions, I might have to see something I wasn't ready to see. I wasn't ready to see that my loyalty had a shape, and that shape left you outside of it. She wrote about Cora. "I looked at that child and I made a calculation I have no defense for. I decided she had enough because she had you. And I decided you had enough because you always seemed to. I was wrong about both." She didn't ask me for money. She didn't ask me to call. She said she'd started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Crane in Harlow. That it was hard. That she'd spent the first session crying, and the second session angry, and the third session starting to understand something about the difference between love and management. The last line. "I don't expect you to forgive me on any timeline that isn't yours. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to say that I see you, 41 years late. But I see you, Nora. I really do." I read it 3 times. On the third read, I laughed because she'd spelled therapist 3 different ways on 3 different lines. James found me on the porch. "What does it say?" "She's trying." Really trying? Or the kind of trying that looks like trying? I thought about the crossed out lines, the 3 attempts at the first sentence, the smudged ink. "Really trying," I said. Now, the thing I want to be careful about saying, because I've thought about it for months and I want to say it exactly right. I did not restore the account. I did not re-enroll Lila and Danny in camp. I did not refile Mom's taxes or re-sign Kevin's insurance. Not because I was punishing them, because those things were crutches. And crutches, kept long enough, convince people they can't walk. Renee enrolled her kids in a camp herself this summer, a less expensive one closer to home. She drove them on the first day and posted a photo. No caption about being blessed, just first day. Mom hired an accountant for her taxes, a retired gentleman who charges $40 and lives 2 streets over. She said he's very thorough. Kevin got his contractor insurance adjusted through his union rep. They're all walking. Slowly, a little unevenly, the way people walk when they're relearning, but walking. 3 months after that October night. January, a Sunday evening. James had put Cora to bed. I was in the kitchen with tea, looking at nothing in particular. My phone buzzed. Renee. Text. I've been trying to figure out how to say this for 2 months, so I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry, Nora. Not because things fell apart, not because I got caught. Because what I did, what I let happen, what I actively did with that $14,000 was a betrayal. And I knew it was a betrayal when I did it. I just told myself you wouldn't notice, or you wouldn't say anything, because you never said anything. You always just kept going. I used that against you. I'm ashamed of it. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if you want to, but I needed you to know I see it clearly. I read it 4 times. I typed back, "Thank you for saying it clearly. That's a start." Her reply, "Can I call sometime?" Mine, "Yes. Give me a little time, but yes." I want to be honest about what this story is and what it isn't. It isn't a story about a woman who cut off her family. I didn't cut anyone off. I stopped funding a dynamic that was consuming me. I stopped being the invisible engine and became a person. It isn't a story about justice. There's no clean justice here. There's $104,000 I'll never see again. There's 11 years I can't reclaim. There's a version of my relationship with my sister, a version where we might have actually known each other, that we can't go back and build. What it is a story about a woman who woke up on a cold Ohio highway at 5 a.m. with her daughter asleep in the back seat and a spreadsheet on her laptop, and finally understood that love is not the same as sacrifice. That being needed is not the same as being valued. That permanence is not the same as mattering. Last month, Sunday morning. The light comes through the kitchen window at 8 a.m. in a way that always makes me stop what I'm doing. Low and sideways, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look like they were painted. Cora came downstairs in her pajamas with Percy the elephant under one arm and a drawing rolled up under the other. She put it on the table in front of me. I unrolled it. A house, yellow, with a big blue door, a tree on each side. In front of the house, 6 stick figures. Tall one with brown hair, me. Taller one, James. Small one with pigtails, her. Small one with spiky hair she'd drawn for the baby we're expecting in April. Curly-haired figure in a purple dress, Mom. And one more. Dark hair, smaller, standing a little to the side. "Who's this one?" I asked. Cora leaned in and pointed. "That's Aunt Renee. I put her a little bit away because you said you're still figuring it out. But I put her in because I think she should be in the picture." I looked at my daughter, 4 years old, sleeping bag age, step stool age, already wiser about people than most of the adults around her. "Can I keep this?" I said. "I made it for you," she said, and she ran back upstairs to get dressed. I sat at the table and looked at that drawing for a long time. 6 figures, 1 family, imperfect, incomplete, still figuring out where to stand, but in the picture. All of us, finally, in the picture. That night, I walked down the hall to check on Cora the way I do every night. She was on her back, hair fanned out, covers pulled up, the turtle nightlight throwing green and blue shapes across the ceiling, sound asleep, in her bed, in her room, in her home. I stood in the doorway. 5 months ago, this child was on her hands and knees on a hardwood floor, trying to unroll a sleeping bag that kept sliding. She'd asked me if we were camping. I'd told her we were going home. And we did. We went home. And we stayed. If you're out there, the one who always shows up and never gets seen, the one who pays the bills nobody knows about and fills the gaps nobody acknowledges, and holds things together with both hands while everyone else holds you last, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to stop. Not forever if you don't want, not cruelly, but you are allowed to put down what was never supposed to be yours to carry alone. You are allowed to have a bed. You are allowed to have a chair at the table. You are allowed to have your name said out loud. That's my story. And if any part of it felt like looking in a mirror, if you've ever kept a spreadsheet you never wanted to use, or driven home in the dark, or watched your child on a step stool and felt something in your chest settle like a foundation before it splits, I see you. I really do. Drop it in the comments. Which moment hit you hardest? Was it the step stool? The spreadsheet and what was on it? Cora's drawing, with Renee standing just a little to the side? Or the moment Mom finally called Cora on a Tuesday just to ask what she was drawing? Tell me. Let's talk about it. And if this story made something move in you, share it with the person in your life who's been carrying too much for too long. They need to hear it. There's another story in the description that I think will stay with you just as long. Thank you for being here until the very last word.